All right, let's get started with the agenda. So this is all about how we've incorporated artificial intelligence or made it accessible to you, maybe is a better way to put it, in Intuiface. I suspect that some of you on this call are still somewhat new to the world of generative AI, generative artificial intelligence. We're going to spend this much time explaining it because what Intuiface enables you to do is to leverage it, is to take advantage of it, to incorporate it in your experience. So we'll do a little bit of a walkthrough of generative AI. I also recognize that not all of you know Intuiface particularly well. We're just going to show you what we've done with artificial intelligence, so you might be a little lost. I'll do the best I can to demonstrate the use of these interface assets inside Intuiface. Interface assets, these are the plugins that you can use to extend Intuiface, and I'm going to demonstrate how you can use these three generative AI models, GPT, DALL-E, and Whisper, in Intuiface. And if you don't know what that means, that's what generative AI section is all about, is to explain that. After we demonstrate it, I'm going to show you how it works, and then we're going to discuss how you can extend it to other generative AI models. So out of the box, you can use these, and we're going to show you how to use others. If you want to use Google's or Meta's or something else. We are then going to pivot to a different thing we've done with artificial intelligence, was to help you make your own interface assets, your own plugin to Intuiface using something called the Intuiface Coding Assistant, GPT. GPT is what OpenAI calls these custom things you can talk to. It's even a little confusing the way they name it, but hopefully all of this will be clear so that by the time we get to Q&A, you've got no questions because it all makes total sense. So we'll get started. Again, use that questions panel in the GoToWebinar toolbar. There will be lots of demos, not a lot of slides, but a little bit of slides because we need to talk about generative AI. What the heck does that mean? And how is it relevant to you as a current or future Intuiface user? Generative artificial intelligence. There's many different kinds of artificial intelligence, so generative AI is a flavor. It is artificial intelligence capable of generating text, images, videos, audio, or other data using what are called generative models. The models generate the text, the images, the videos, or other things, typically in response to a prompt. You say, I need something. It's an answer to a question, some kind of request. And the generative AI model, the generative model, generates a response. It could be a text response, image, video, audio, or other data. It's the kind of thing you're asking for. And typically models specialize. There's a specialized models for text and specialized models for images, etc. The way these things work is they learn the patterns and structure of training data. And if you pay any attention to the news, you know that the New York Times is suing OpenAI because a lot of these generative AI companies have been borrowing data to train their models. But this is how generative models learn things. They're fed training data. They're fed text and images and videos or the web or the New York Times. And this somehow magically trains the model so it can generate new stuff based on a prompt. It kind of learns things. The notion of generative models is not new. It's been around forever, but this notion of deep learning kind of changed everything and really accelerated the ability of these companies to put out models that are really intelligent and do amazing things with images, speech, and others. So that's the generative AI, things like ChatGPT. If you ever use ChatGPT, that's using generative AI. Now, some of you must be wondering, got it, but still, how the heck does it work? And I'm with you. I would love to know. I don't have a clue how that works. That is not in the scope of this webinar. I don't know. In fact, as I understand it, the models know nothing. They don't know anything. They just learn patterns. You give them all that input data, all that stuff you give them to learn things, but they don't learn anything. They just identify patterns. That is why they can say things that are wrong, because they don't know anything. And sometimes they will hallucinate and come up with something that isn't true. It's magic. This is as close as I've ever come to magic in computer science. It's unbelievable. And the world is super complicated. So if you go down any generative AI rat hole, you're going to find tons of models that you've never heard of. They're just super smart people. Thank goodness for them. They're all the ones killing themselves in the three-body problem. It's unbelievably complex. But for our purposes, let's talk about some of the generative models that exist that you might come across and could in fact use some more than others in Intuiface. And we'll start with chat. So there are multiple generative models for chat. You enter a prompt and you get a response. We all know ChatGPT. ChatGPT is that user interface that lets you submit prompts to what's called GPT. So under the covers, it's called GPT. When you're using Copilot, when you're using Bing, and all of that is GPT under the covers from OpenAI. But it's not the only generative AI model for chat, for answering questions. There's Gemini from Google, Claude from Anthropic, Coral from Cohere, XAI with Elon Musk, it's Grok. So there's all these different generative AI models, many of which expose web APIs, which means you can use them in Intuiface. That's how we do it with GPT, which I'm going to show you in a moment. Images is another one. There's models that can generate images. DALL-E, Imagen, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion. There are others. DALL-E is also from OpenAI and got a lot of attention when it released not too long ago. You could use that in Intuiface because it has a web API. There's now a whole bunch of video generation things going on, like Source, Synesthesia, Hyper, and Video. In theory, you could, if there's an API, right, you can work with those as well. The videos scare the crap out of me, so do the images. Coding. So even in the early days, when OpenAI was just early on promoting GPT, there was a lot of work on coding to help developers write code. Copilot was sort of the moniker for that thing, but you can see that there are other models and variants for writing code. Music is now something with products like Suno, the Suno model. You describe a song in the style of Billy Joel, and it spits out a song in the style of Billy Joel. That's insane. But you can apply it to anything you can teach a model. The model can then learn, whatever that means, and help you. So just as an example, there's tons of them, but marketing is an example. Intuiface uses Jasper to help us on the marketing side, to write copy, for example. But there's other companies doing that. So you can have generative models for anything, really, as long as you have training data. And most of them, certainly images, videos, coding, chat, have web APIs, which has enabled Intuiface to enable you to use some of those models. And that would be GPT, DALL-E, and Whisper. Whisper is here's some audio and transcribe it, turn it into text. And so it's a fairly niche generative model. Input some audio, it spits out the transcription of what was said in that audio. So I'm going to do some demos right now to show you what that all looks like. So I'm going to use an experience. For those of you unfamiliar with Intuiface, we have something called the examples catalog. It's a whole bunch of experiences available to you for free. And in our editor called Composer, there is a tab called Examples. And here, right here, Generative AI for non-Windows platforms, Generative AI for Windows. So what I'm about to show you, you can do, okay? Play. We have 3 examples in here that were first shared at Integrated Systems Europe in late January, early February this year. So if you had attended ISE and joined us in Barcelona, you would have seen this already. Let's demonstrate. There are 3 use cases in this experience. We'll start with image generation. This is just an example of our ability to submit a prompt and to process the prompt from an OpenAI generative model. What we're doing here is we're essentially building a prompt. So watercolor, violets, foggy. And so, sorry, we'll do foggy. So if you look on the right, what Intuiface has done is it's taken these selections and it's built a prompt. The prompt on the right, a watercolor painting of a field of violets on a foggy day. I've clicked the generate image. DALL-E's not the fastest. And I think under the covers, it's GPT-4. It's a still pretty fast model, but it takes about 10 seconds. But here we go, a watercolor painting of a field of violets on a foggy day. You've enabled the person at the screen to somehow express their preferences. Intuiface turned that into a prompt, and under the covers, submitted that prompt to the DALL-E large language model. And there it is. And this is persistent. If I go home, there's the image we just generated. So although this image was generated on the fly, Intuiface can retain it and use it. Maybe it's for the background. Somehow it's creating some sort of ambiance. So that's an example of how you can use Intuiface to very straightforwardly work with DALL-E. Is it the most interesting scenario? No. Well, we'll get to that. I know it's not, and we'll get to that. Scenario number 2, which is asking a question, the kind of chat GPT thing here. I mean, if you look at this little, what do you call that, carousel thing, there are some questions. Now, you could actually scan your own question and submit it, but we've got some preset ones. Why is it about Barcelona and Catalan? Because of ISC. And I can send the question, and then I can get an answer. Catalan is language. So under the covers, we're taking the question and submitting it to, in this case, the GPT model, and it is giving us a response. You can't see, but under the covers, we're actually adding some stuff. There you go. Other people are using their phone right now to ask questions. Oh, that's interesting. No weather. So people are using their phone right now to ask questions. So I better get out of here before somebody asks something very rude. But you can account for that, by the way, because there is a GPT model, an OpenAI model that makes sure there's nothing rude in a question. But under the covers, we're actually saying don't answer too long. So we're actually saying keep it to about a sentence. Now, you don't see that, but under the covers, when we submit the question, we're also saying, and by the way, keep it down to a sentence, which could be because, tell Jeff, I want to pause. Take that. That's awesome. Thank you. So not only can we submit prompts and process the response, we can modify those prompts. And so we use DALL-E to show you the ability to send a prompt and get a response, do something with the response. With the second use case, we showed you that not only can we take these prompts and even let you submit them using your phone, for example, but we can modify them a little bit. We don't have to submit it raw. Still, is that a fascinating use case for signage? No. It's a proof of concept. It proves that we can do it, but still, how would I use this in a productive, meaningful way? And that's what the third use case allows us to do. It's a genius idea cooked up by the Museum of Flight and Paolo Tosolini, both referenced in the bottom right-hand corner. Can't take credit for this. This is running, a variant of this is running in the Museum of Flight. It is a wayfinding kiosk activated by voice. You express verbally what it is you want to see, and this AI wayfinder, this artificial intelligence wayfinder, will tell you the best place to visit inside the museum. It's using 2 generative models from OpenAI. It's using GPT, and it's using Whisper. So Whisper, as I mentioned, takes the audio, turns it into text. GPT does the magic. Now, I'm not going to show you how the magic is done yet, but let's give an example. So that's a stylized look at the Museum of Flight, which is a kick-ass museum, by the way, in Seattle, I believe. So there's a stylized museum, the Museum of Flight. Where can I learn about the history of flight? So it used my default microphone. Whisper took my audio, transcribed it. You can see it in green. And then under the covers, something happened where GPT was able to tell us, go to the Great Gallery, which has this stuff. You can see it in yellow below. Also, you get the point of interest icon on the right. Something happened between the capture of my audio and getting this answer. And remember, this isn't a human, this is GPT. How the hell did GPT know what part of the museum to recommend? This is the beauty of the prompt, and this is what has changed over time, is the recognition of how powerful a prompt can be. It is not just raw little questions. Now, I'm going to show you the prompt under the covers. It probably took them hours to build this prompt, to get it just right. Why? Because not only did they make sure they could properly constrain it, but also to make sure that it didn't make mistakes. And even today, in April 2024, no matter how good your prompt is, sometimes it could still hallucinate a little bit, stray a little bit. So you need to kind of proactively keep it on the straight and narrow. But big picture, they took what they would tell a human being and told it to GPT. They trained GPT to be a wayfinding assistant in the museum. This is the prompt. this whole thing, and then at the very end, you tack on what was captured through the audio. So we're telling GPT, you're a helpful assistant working for the Museum of Flight. Your role is to guide visitors by recommending the most suitable exhibit. For each inquiry, your response must strictly adhere to the specified format, which uses information from the provided gallery list. I'm sure when they first wrote the context, it was half that length, but they've realized over time they need to emphasize things, specify things. Here's the gallery list. 1, great gallery, explanation. 2, red barn, explanation. Here's the response format. Every response must be formatted, ID/gallery name/gallery description. There should be no additional text outside this format. Now, why are they saying that? They're saying every response should be formatted as follows, because probably without it, GPT was still occasionally straying. So don't say anything else. And if you're not sure, point them to the great gallery. And here's an example. We're not even going to trust you. We're going to give you an example to make sure you really understand. So all of this is being provided to GPT before it submits the question, where can I learn more about the history of flight? You have constrained, you've taught GPT and constrained it, and I'm presuming that it is pretty damn accurate. Now you know that through natural language, you can program GPT. You can teach it to recommend, to inform, to advise, to direct. You could teach it anything, right? You just submit all of the context and the directions, and then it does its job. And you can teach it about your inventory or about your product or about your place of business. You could submit all of this information, create the constraints, create the context, and now you have an engine that is doing something very specific for you in retail, in education, in the workplace, wherever. It's amazing. Great job to Paulo and the Museum of Flight to come up with this, because this shows you what is possible. This is programming, but it's natural language. Anybody can do it. You're teaching the model. This should hopefully help you understand why it's such a big deal that you can work with GPT inside Composer. So the next item on the agenda is, how does this work? Okay. And very simply, yes, I need glasses. Very simply, if you look on the left, for those of you who know interface assets, these are interfaces with things outside of the running experience. We have now introduced interface assets for GPT, DALL-E, and Whisper. We've enabled you to submit prompts to these generative models to receive the response and do something with those responses. That's available out of the box. You can see here that out of the box, we have 2 variants for GPT, 2 variants for Whisper, 1 for DALL-E. Why 2 variants? Well, these are using, it's the web API, but it's a little complicated. So we did some things with code. We're going to show you that. We're going to discuss that. But we needed different variants for Windows and non-Windows platforms. Same for Whisper. For DALL-E, there was nothing special to do, so it's very straightforward. There's just one version. I don't want to get stuck on that. Don't worry about it. No matter what platform you're on with Intuiface, it works. So what does it mean it works? It means that you can, for example, with GPT, we'll give you one example. Everything in Intuiface has properties, triggers, and actions. The GPT, ChatGPT interface asset has properties, triggers, and actions. Let's start with the actions. See send prompt? You can send a prompt to GPT, but notice specify system guidance. And so the idea here is that's the context. Those are the constraints. So that giant prompty thing that I showed you for the wayfinder could be the system guidance. And then all you're doing subsequently is send prompt, send prompt, send prompt, because from GPT's perspective, it's all one session. It's going to remember that system guidance because it's all one session. So you specify the system guidance using the context and constraints you put in the original prompt, and then you can send these new prompts to get the actual thing you want out of it. Because GPT remembers the sequence, the whole conversation, you can clear that session. That's why there's a clear chat session, which means start over, which means maybe you need to send a new system guidance. On the trigger side is when we get the response. So it's waiting, it's listening. Did I get a response yet? Did I get a response yet? I got a response. And now you can then process that response. Of course, if there's an error, you want to be prepared for that. And there's one and only one property, which is an API key, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. So that's how it works. And for Intuiface users, that's easy. That's not hard. There's lots of reasons you're using interface assets in Intuiface. They let you interface with anything. The weather, sports scores, back office ERP applications, digitized archives, you name it, you can talk to it, retrieve from it, write to it in real time thanks to interface assets. This is just another interface asset, which means you don't have to be a developer to communicate with GPT or with DALL-E or with Whisper. You don't have to be. Just use the interface asset, collect the prompt in the context that you define, submit the prompt, get a response, process that response. It's really simple stuff. DALL-E and Whisper work the same way. I'm not even going to show it to you because it works the same way. And, there might be some questions. So let me go back to the slides and talk a little bit about how it works. Okay. I've shown you there's the interface assets. You can submit prompts, process those responses. Let's go to, I should be in presentation mode, I guess. So what you will need is an OpenAI account with a token-funded API key. This is how OpenAI works. This is one of the ways they make money. You create an account, an OpenAI account. You get an API key. You can have more than one. You get at least one. And you can fund that key. You can pay money into it for tokens. And tokens is one of these mystical, magical things. The way they define it is it's pieces of words. So they say 1,000 tokens is about 750 words. I assume that's any language, but I don't know, but I presume. And there's, depending on the model you use, that determines the cost of tokens. So what you see on the right is the most expensive possible GPT model you can use today, GPT-4 Turbo. And so their pricing is $10 for 1 million tokens for the prompts, $30 for 1 million tokens for the response. Okay. This is the way it works. We're using their API, right? I told you that. We're using GPT's API, DALL-E's API, Whisper's API. We're using the API. And to use the API, you need an API key. And we're not funding our own for the world to use. So you need to get your own. Depending on how often you use it and how you fund it, tokens go a long way. It depends on what you're doing with your tokens. So that is the one and only prerequisite if you want to use the interface assets for GPT, Whisper, and DALL-E. There might be a question, which is, what about other things, right? How do you build interface assets, these extensions, for other OpenAI models or for other companies' models? And well, we've actually got a new one right now, which is Vision. So why don't we play with this, because this is kind of cool. And then Seb is going to spend a moment to tell you how he built this, because the way he created this is the way that you, if you're a developer, but how you could create some really advanced stuff with any generative AI model. But all of you guys right now, guys means ladies and gentlemen, scan the QR code if you have a moment. It's going to ask you to browse your device for an image. Pick an image. And then ask a question about that image. Anything you want. A simple question would be, describe what's in the image. I'm going to give you a moment.
Side note, we are not collecting any data. We are not collecting these images.
Correct. This is all going to OpenAI. They're learning about you maybe, but we are not. By the way, you don't have to do this. But if you're interested, because this is coming next. This will be available in Composer in the next couple months. I don't know. Maybe not that long. Side note for you Intuiface veterans, you're browsing your phone's file system. That's pretty cool. Using an Intuiface experience. Go ahead, Seb.
A couple of weeks for the availability of Vision in Composer.
So I'm guessing a lot of you have tried this. I don't know if you've ever worked with Vision before. It's unbelievable. It really is amazing. If you tell it, and I know what Seb has done, he's kind of constrained the length of the response because if it's unconstrained, you can get like a book length description of the image, which is maybe interesting, but also takes a while. So he's constrained the length of the response. So you get it faster. But if you remove those constraints, I mean, what you should have received is already mind-boggling, but it's just unbelievable how accurate it can be. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, you can train GPT and Vision on your inventory, on the exhibits in your museum. And when somebody uses their phone in your app to take a picture of something, you can then answer questions about it, right? So I'm going to, so Seb, why don't you jump in here and talk about how did you build Vision, or really all the interface assets, I guess, except maybe DALL-E. And what if you want to work with Google, or what if you want to work with Meta? You know, how does that work? So can you talk about that for a moment?
Sure. And just before I do that, one thing to notice is that the QR code you scanned led you to an interface experience hosted on the web. And again, for those of you who are not that familiar with Intuiface, you can build experiences to run on devices in Venue or to run on the web, like you just experimented on your phones, without installing any app. So that's also
point.
one of the real powers of Intuiface.
Great point. That's
So
Intuiface
speaking
too,
about
on the web. Okay.
Yeah, speaking about these IAs, interface assets, aka plugin, that you will find now in Composer, the ones for ChatGPT, for Whisper, they are built using either TypeScript for our player for other platforms other than Windows platforms like Android, BrightSign, the web, Chrome OS, etc., Raspberry Pi, or built in .NET for our player for Windows, which I'm going to call the still current player for Windows. So we have these two languages, at least for ChatGPT and for Whisper. For these other platforms, which now, as you understand where we're going to, what we used to call the player next gen a few months ago, we use TypeScript, and we have a component development kit, the Intuiface CDK. This is publicly available on GitHub, so even the source code of the CDK is publicly available. And that's the second highlighted thing you can find on our GitHub here. The first repository here, the OpenAI interface assets, is the source code, both in TypeScript and .NET, for the plugins, the interface assets that you will find in Composer. So three things. One, you don't need to go into GitHub if you just want to use what we made available. You don't need to be a developer to use the ChatGPT or the Whisper plugins in Composer. You only need to go to this GitHub page if you want to see how it was built, if you want to modify how it was built, because maybe we didn't add one particular parameter that you need. I know we added the temperature, for example, for the ChatGPT. We didn't add the seed or whatever other parameters they have. We didn't put all of them. We tried to keep it simple and usable. Or you'd like to build something similar with another provider, like Google Gemini, for example. And you don't know where to start, so you can have a look at this source code, use it as an example, and then build your own plugin in TypeScript or .NET using the same mechanisms. The other interesting part is that for ChatGPT, Whisper, and Vision, which is available in this same repositories in the branch right now, I didn't write 80% of the code. ChatGPT did. Either our coding assistant, and we're going to come back to that, or the regular ChatGPT or even Copilot, any kind of AI tool you can use, we'll come back to that. So this repository is really for if you want to see how it was built, if you want to build something similar. It is not for if you just want to use what we already made available.
Thanks, Seb. I have one important point and one not important point. We'll start with the important point. Intuiface veterans might be wondering, how come you're not using API Explorer? These are web APIs. Why am I using API Explorer? Well, that's because there are, in certain regards, there's a complexity to the OpenAI web APIs that cannot be accommodated for by API Explorer. And so we had to hand code it. DALL-E does not have any complication. We didn't have to use hand coding for DALL-E. That's why it's not in GitHub. We used API Explorer to build that integration. But for Whisper and for GPT, there was enough complexity that it went beyond what was within the scope of API Explorer. In the future, maybe that'll change, but that's how it is today.
That to expand on that, Whisper needs to be able to access your microphone. So there is some code in the interface set that does the thing to ask for your permission in the browser or use the permission on the player in Venue to be able to access the hardware of your machine. API Explorer cannot do that. Vision, you need to be able to upload an image. API Explorer cannot do that, at least today. So that's why we needed some custom plugins written in TypeScript or .NET for these usages.
Yep. The not so important but very interesting is there's, I don't know if you know this, but the company's French. And so we have OpenAI, which is artificial intelligence, but you wouldn't say artificial intelligence in French. You would say intelligence artificielle, I guess. I don't know, right? It would be IA, I think. And so there's IA, which is artificial intelligence, and then there's the IA, which is the interface asset. And so an OpenAI IA completely explodes a French person's brain because they have no idea what it is they're looking at. And so it's an unexpected complication for my colleagues overseas in Toulouse. But hopefully everybody understands. Look, again, you never need to be here for the interface assets that are in Composer. You never need to be here. It works out of the box. There's nothing to program. What we're showing you here is, well, if there's something not out of the box and you're really interested in it, well, there is a way to do it. You can use this stuff, but okay, you're writing a little bit of code. But most of that code can probably be auto-generated, which gets us to our next topic, which is creating your own plugin, your own interface asset, your own IA, not AI, using something called the Intuiface Coding Assistant, GPT. What the heck is that, and why would I want to use that? So let me go to our browser here. When you have when you use ChatGPT, you are submitting your prompts to what is under the covers the model called GPT, and I think the latest is GPT-4. So you are submitting your prompt to GPT-4, but the model broadly is called GPT. For some reason, I don't know why, OpenAI decided that if you want to create a custom version of GPT, you call it a GPT. It's got the exact same name. So the model and custom versions of the model built just for you are both called GPT. Sorry. But as it turns out, you can do that. You can create your own version of ChatGPT, your own custom version. In a way, it's like taking that wayfinder prompt and creating an instance of GPT that is always governed by that prompt. It has its own URL. And when you go to the URL, you get to that very special instance of GPT called Museum of Flight Wayfinder, where that context and those constraints are baked in and cannot be removed. Well, remember, you can use GPT to code. So could you use GPT to help you write the code for interface assets for Intuiface? Yes. If you have an OpenAI account, and look in the upper left, chat.openai.com/GPTs, GPTs, you get to their store. They should call it a store. I mean, I think everything is free right now, I think. Catalog, but they just call it GPTs. And if you search it, you'll actually find for Intuiface, well, 2 of them. So I don't know who the heck Adam is, but good for him, man. He wanted to put something together. We have not verified it. Don't even know what it really does. Don't trust it, but free world. And then there's the coding assistant. That's us, buyintuiface.com. That's our logo. That's us. Assists in the creation of TypeScript-based interface assets for Intuiface. Okay. Here it is. It works just like ChatGPT. There's a prompt. You can see the blinking cursor at the bottom. There's a prompt. And you tell it what you want. But in this case, it's not, is Jeff doing a good job, or is Catalan a language or a dialect? It is, write me an interface asset for blah, blah, blah. So for example, here's one that we created for text-to-speech. Create a TypeScript interface asset for Intuiface that provides text-to-speech functionality. The asset should follow the CDK guidelines, blah, blah, blah. Under the covers, the Intuiface Coding Assistant has been trained. It has constraints and has been configured to understand the CDK. It knows the CDK. GPT does nothing, doesn't know anything, but it's been trained on the Intuiface CDK, sort of the rules of interface asset creation. It knows the rules. And because it's GPT, you don't have to give too much detail about the target API, the target thing you want to support. It kind of can understand it. So create an interface asset for text-to-speech. Better use the CDK, and it should expose the following properties, triggers, and actions. It should use the web speech API that is found in most web browsers. It should handle voice selection, whatever. Okay, so that's the prompt. And I can assure you that's not the first time we wrote that prompt. Some effort, and that's part of the thing. And I'm going to get to that. And then the coding assistant says, well, okay, well, if you want to create an interface asset that makes the functionality, then we got to do a bunch of stuff. And it spits out this code, which is 80% correct. In this code, by the way, it's telling us in this code, we do this, we do this, we do this. These are all the rules you told me in the CDK, so I'm following those rules. It is likely that this is not done yet. Okay, first of all, you need to compile it. And well, so let's talk about that a little bit. You can create interface assets with the assistance of the coding assistant, but you are not finished when using the coding assistant. First of all, it's a tech preview. We don't even think this is done. But even if this was done, you still have to compile it. It's not spitting out compiled code. This is the raw code that needs to be compiled. And so you still need some developer skill because you got to compile it. And since this is still really 80-20, like Seb said, 20% is missing or wrong. When you compile it, there's going to be problems. And you're going to need to troubleshoot those problems, which means you still need to understand the CDK and know how to troubleshoot. So let's get to the slides and talk about, these sort of things you need to know and the things you need to do. We will go back like this. Okay, so what do you need and what do you need to know? What do you need? Well, you still need an account. Because at the end of the day, you're still using the API, and so you need an API key with tokens. So just like you use the out-of-the-box interface assets for GPT, you're going to need an API key for those things. You need an API key for the new stuff as well. So that's not news. But you're going to need a second thing, because another way OpenAI makes money is they don't let you access GPTs unless you have what they call a Chat GPT Plus account. You need a Chat GPT Plus account to access that store of GPTs. On the right is the pricing in the US. I have no idea, how it's priced elsewhere. If you have the free tier, you're not accessing the GPT store. You need at least what they call Plus, and depending on your business, maybe you can use Team or what have you. These are monthly costs, but they bill it annually. So it is what it is. If you want to use our interface assets, you need an AI account with an API key. And if you want to use our coding assistant, you need a ChatGPT Plus account. Are you a developer? No? Then don't bother. You're never going to use the coding assistant, ever. At least not for the next year. I mean, I can't imagine. You still got to compile. I can't compile stuff. I don't even know what that means. So, you only need the GPT Plus account. Now, maybe you're fascinated in using somebody else's GPT in the store. There's 1 billion GPTs in the store. Go ahead, get the GPT Plus account. But if you're a developer and you want the ability to use the coding assistant to accelerate your ability to generate 80% of the interface asset TypeScript code, ChatGPT Plus account. And then to reinforce, you still need to be a developer. And this is, again, where I'm going to back off and let Seb kind of run in with the details. So go ahead, Seb.
Yeah, so one thing I would just slightly rephrase is, if you are not a developer, but you're curious and you want to give it a try, even you, Jeff, you could compile an interface asset. And that's thanks to the CDK. So this component dev kit that we have available on GitHub, there's one link with the documentation giving you the steps and the command lines you need to put into Visual Studio Code, which is a free tool to use. So it is not that complex to build the code that has been generated by whatever. And that's what this slide is about. So what you need to know, or just what you need to build your custom interface asset that will use some sort of AI APIs, whether it's OpenAI, they have a new endpoint that we do not support off the shelf, or you want to try Gemini, or again, any kind of API where you want to create your own plugin. You need Visual Studio Code, that's a free tool. You need to follow the instructions in our GitHub, which is typing 2 or 3 command lines to install our packages and build a skeleton of the interface asset. Somewhere in between, you need to write the code. So have the whole code written by our coding assistant GPT, and that will give you one complete TypeScript file, and you copy the whole file into your skeleton. That does require the GPT Plus subscription. Or if you know a bit more what you're doing, if you have more developer skills and you don't want to pay for GPT Plus, you can use the skeleton, which is generated for you by the CDK, and then fill in the blanks with some code you write yourself or you have generated by ChatGPT, Copilot, any AI tool that you want to use, free or not. It doesn't matter. The only thing you need to make sure is that this AI tool writes the code in TypeScript, not JavaScript, not Python, not C++, TypeScript, at least for the player for all the platforms but Windows. So whether you use the Assistant GPT with your GPT Plus account or any free solution, you just copy and paste some code into that skeleton you have generated with our CDK. And once that's done, you run the npm run build command. Again, this is documented in our CDK, and you let Visual Studio do the job. That's it. So the process is very straightforward, especially with our newer player, the ones for the all platforms but Windows. And this player is coming to Windows soon as well. So this wording is going to change a little bit, but for the better.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we always say that for developers, interface asset construction is not hard. You know, I mean, it is not complicated at all. You're not a developer, okay? We can document it. You know, if you're interested. But it's important for me that you understand that for the out of the box interface assets, you don't have to know any of this stuff. It just works out of the box. You don't even know how it was written or what it's doing. It just works. It's instead of Intel inside, it's Sebonier inside. Yeah.
I was going to say, it's important to realize that I wrote the code for these OpenAI interface assets that are now available off the shelf in Composer. But what I did, any interface user, any interface customer can do the same. I am not part of our product team. I'm on the sales marketing customer team. And so what I did was using the same features everybody here has access to. I did not use any insider stuff to build these plugins.
Yep, everything is documented. Everything is online in GitHub. It's all public. And by the way, we have a great support team. If you're trying this and you're having trouble, open a ticket and they'll help you do it. It may be Seb, could be somebody else, but we can help you out. So you're not going to be stuck on your own. We got an awesome support team. Well, guess what? Hopefully you understand the power of the prompt and what it enables you to do with GPT, DALL-E, and Whisper, how powerful it can be to inform, to direct, to describe, to whatever, for any experience in any context. And available out of the box. Vision is coming. We'll work on more. Sort of think of them as reference implementations, which means they work. But if you want to use something else, you could build something else. You know, we showed you how to do that too. And then if you want to build that something else, we have the coding assistant. We got the 80-20 rule today. 80% of the work is done for you. So it's going to be a lot faster than if you just tried to do it from scratch. And now you've got a new interface asset, a new plugin for a new model. Very straightforward. It's super powerful. That can be combined with everything else Intuiface does. All the different types of interactive modalities from voice and touch and sensors and gestures, all of that stuff supplemented with this ability to work with generative AI models. It's pretty awesome. So we have reached the Q&A portion of the agenda. I didn't stop for questions, which sometimes I do, but there's so much to cover. I think we would have gotten bogged down. So now it's take a breather, and Seb, maybe you can pull up some questions that we should go public.
Sure. So first of all, for all of you for asking these questions in the chat. I hope you were able to get the answers. Some of them I did say it explicitly. I got the answers written by GPT because I didn't know the answer. So this tool can really be used for a lot of things. One of the latest questions I haven't answered yet in the chat, will this work for iOS? Yes, all these TypeScript interface assets do work on iOS. All the OpenAI interface assets that Jeff demonstrated today do work on iOS. I would just say one thing: when you build an interface asset for platforms like iOS, you want to test it on iOS, and especially iOS. And I know I'm a bit biased on this topic. Apple tends to do things differently and to limit what's available without asking users permissions. It's like accessing your phone storage to get an image before uploading. You probably had some kind of pop-up, hey, do you allow this app to access your files? And they do more than others like Android. So yes, this process works for iOS. Just be careful and test it on iOS as early as possible.
For those who don't know, Intuiface
slightly different.
I was just going to say, for those who don't know, Intuiface haven't used it. When you're using Composer, the editor, to build your experience, you can test it in Composer. You don't have to run it on the target device. But as Seb said, at some point you have to test it on the target device. You cannot trust the test in Composer because once you're on the device, there are nuances that could be different. That's why. Other questions, Seb, that you think are?
There's another question, but a suggestion from Paolo, which is to crowdsourcing the most important needs for interface assets from the community, and then we release some new AIs, maybe not officially, maybe not supported like we do with OpenAI. Sure. And so to do that, the best place to do it is to go on community.interface.com. So Paolo, I will let you start that thread, so you can gather all the needs from the community. That's definitely a good idea. And to be honest, Vision and OpenAI and Whisper came a little bit from us, but mainly from requests we had from our users. So we are trying to listen to all of you and bring these novelties to the Interface platform as much as we can.
There was a question. Somebody missed the GitHub discussion. That's why I put the slide on screen so they could know where the CDK is.
Okay, CDK stands for Component Development Kit, and that's, for now, a big helper to build interface assets compared to what we used to do before with our previous player for Android, iOS, etc. This is much, much, much easier and straightforward. So again, we have in this GitHub, the CDK, there's one documentation page on how to build your interface assets. You have 3 command lines to type in your Visual Studio Code, and you have your skeleton ready to be compiled. It's super easy.
Lots of questions about whether or not this is recorded. It is recorded. We'll be sending out the recording.
Yes, the link will be sent most likely tomorrow to all the registrants. We do have a new question from Eric. Is there a way to create a GPT model that would be trained by text found within Interface Headless CMS? That's a good one. As of today, I'm going to answer no for one reason. We do not have yet a public API for the HCMS. So I'm going to have to say yes and no. So if you wanted to get the data directly from the CMS and send it to GitHub, you need some sort of API to get that data from the CMS and then forward it. Now, you can get that data in your experience, and you can forward that data to OpenAI's API. So you could do that, and I know there are endpoints in OpenAI to train models. We haven't gone that far into custom model training, at least on the API side of it, besides creating our GPT. But again, these are 2 slightly different topics. All right.
That might be it.
I get a question from Scott, which was interesting. What are some of the typical types of code that you need to rewrite or to modify, or the last 20% of the code when you use the coding assistant? We did say 80-20%. That's the rule of thumb. It will greatly depend on how good your prompt is, the complexity of the code you ask, and to see if that code works, probably 100% is doable. The example that Jeff used at ISE and the one he showed here to do some text to speech using the web speech API, if I recall, it was working like 100% on Windows and Android, but maybe 90% on iOS, because iOS had something specific to it. So I can't tell you this is the ratio and this is what you will have to fix. And another thing to take into account is the quality of that result is based on the training we provide to this model, and our team keeps improving that model itself. So these numbers will get better and better. Congrats. Thank you for the feedback.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if, because there was a question about whether or not every interaction with the GPT feeds the OpenAI monster with new information. I don't know that you can. I don't know if you can prevent that or not. I don't know. What I know is that we have what's called a team account, because a lot of us are working with the OpenAI stuff. And when we're in our workspace, everything we do is not shared with OpenAI. In fact, if you look at the bottom of the screen, Intuiface Workspace chats are not used to train our models. So when we're in our team account, the broader OpenAI models cannot see what's going on. I don't know whether or not we can control when the public uses this. Honestly, I don't know. It's another question to ask ChatGPT.
I did, and I posted the answer, and the answer was too long for me to understand it. So I need to to read that after a third coffee, probably, to make sure I understand exactly what it says. I think Paolo also posted a link to the enterprise policies of ChatGPT, which might say something different. So I'm no lawyer. That's what I said in the chat. So this has to be read carefully. Hagit, yes, we do have an example of an experience that uses ChatGPT available in our examples catalog. Jeff, if you can go back to your composer and show that panel, please. That'd be great. And Roman, I did see your question. So will you be integrating a locally hosted model for privacy conscious clients? What if your clients wants to run it fully offline? I would say that's up to you. If you can build something that runs offline, an LLM, on a regular sized machine and not a server sized machine, and you have an API, then yeah, definitely you can connect your interface experience to that. I don't think Intuiface as a company is going to provide such a service, because that's kind of far from our core, which is Composer and the player, and enabling you to make these integrations, not building what's at the other end of the tunnel.
I mean, you could argue that the interface assets today have no idea where that model is. It doesn't know if it's local or on the web. It's just throwing out an AP, a call, and it's getting a response. It could be local, it could be remote. It doesn't know, let alone care. But you're the one who has to host it, make it work.
We got a new question from Scott. Could GPT be used in Composer to assist in the setup of triggers, actions, and bindings? I don't know if I can say anything about that. I don't think I can.
I mean, I would say that probably the short answer is no. I mean, it has been trained on the CDK. It has been trained on the notion of building an interface asset. It has not been trained on properties, triggers, and action, that sort of interaction.
Our coding assistant definitely no. The coding assistant we talked about today definitely no, that's not his job. He's not trained for that. Could some sort of AI be used in the future, maybe in a future Composer, to help our users? Maybe.
Well, the nightmare, fascinating idea is that you feed the project XML file to GPT and then say, add another trigger and modify the XML. I think that would be a terrible idea today. But one day, I don't know, maybe, where it builds the project file based on prompts. But not today. I wouldn't try it today.
Got a new question. Do you think we can use GPT asset to make a quote shop also end quote recommendation in a collection for us based on the product.
Yeah, of course. Sure. But you have to
But
define the rules.
yeah, what are the rules? What are the available products? If I take your sentence and rephrase it into a museum of flight, can you make a recommendation based on your prompt? What is the first place you should go and visit in the museum? That's exactly what we showed in that sample. So the question is, what is the available list of objects? And then send it as a prompt. Here is the one I'm interested into. What are the other ones that would fit or be interesting as well based on that input, that prompt? So it's really a lot of work on the prompt and the models.
Yeah, I mean, but the cool thing is, think about it. How would you train a human to recommend a product? You would be doing the same thing for GPT. What would you be telling the human being? So we told the GPT. If somebody likes this, if somebody likes summer dresses, then show them these hats. That would be part of the prompt.
Can you use GPT to translate text? Yes. And PDF, not sure. I don't know if you can submit a PDF. I think I tried and you cannot. You have to provide some kind of plain text file. So you have to extract the text first from the PDF, then send that text. That was a couple of months ago. So I'm not sure about where they stand today. Can the client modify their API key, and can we set limits for tokens on the experience end? Yes and yes. Jeff, if you can go back into the project here, there are two places for you to do that. If you can select the ChatGPT AI on the left and open the properties panel. Well, yeah, we even have an AI here. But so in the properties at the top, the one which is orange, OpenAI API key, that's where you set your key, and you can change that dynamically in the experience if you want to. Then if we look into the actions of this interface asset, this plugin, you will see the send prompt. The last parameter is maximum tokens. So you can use less than 50 tokens, 100 tokens, depending on how you want to limit that. Another way which I like to do is to prepend or append to the prompt in one short sentence. So whatever the prompt is, like is Catalan a dialect or language, in one sentence. And that will ask GPT to shorten its response. That's a good trick, and you can do that with a basic text converter in Intuiface.
Yep.
Can it limit total tokens counted even if we restart the experience? Can it limit total tokens counted? I'm not sure I understand that one.
I think what he's saying is you only want a certain number of tokens to be used across independent runs of the experience, not per run. And I don't even. Can you even know how many tokens have been consumed? Is there a? Can you?
Yes, there's an API for that. There's an API for that. Okay. So you probably could. And the biggest question will be, if you went up to that token, what happens? And so either you define that at the experience level, or on your OpenAI account. And Jeff, I'm using your account, so I don't know how it works, but I think you can set a maximum amount of money to spend per month on these tokens, something like that. And then you get an error message, which you can display as a response.
Yeah, you can set. I believe you can set at the account level. You could do that. Yes.
Will there be any step-by-step video training covering something similar to what you have shown? So for the usage of OpenAI, the sample is on the marketplace. Will we put a video on how to use that sample? Not sure if you need that.
We do document
that will be
in the Help Center. We do walk through the experience in the Help Center.
That's true, but is it a video, like a tutorial step-by-step video? I'm not sure. It's not. Now, when it comes to using the CDK to build a TypeScript interface asset, yes, we do have a video for that. And there should be another video updated. Just waiting on a couple of things from the product team before I can make that video. But definitely there will be a step-by-step official make your own TypeScript interface asset that will go in the Academy alongside with the .NET one.
But I've put on screen, there's a Help Center article that walks through how this experience was built. Yeah. It's not a video, but it is taking a look at how it was put together. I mean, we've hit the hour, Seb. We can give folks, I mean, I got a couple minutes. I guess if there's a couple compelling questions, we can hang around. We still got a good number of people in the audience.
Let me check.
There is a translation point I want to make because we haven't been asked it, or at least I didn't notice, but some of you might be interested. Does Whisper work with languages other than English? Because right in my example, I spoke English. And the way the interface asset is set up, it's set to auto. So it doesn't know what language to expect. So in theory, it's going to work with any language and transcribe that language into the language that's spoken. Of course, the wayfinding experience is prompted in English. It's going to answer in English. But I guess in theory, you can ask in another language and get a response in English. I haven't actually tried.
Just answer the question about if it can translate text, would it be able to translate the whole experience with GPT to any language without the need of the CMS? And I would not do that because you would use a lot of tokens and because you would need to ask for the translation each time you need to present that text. You would not store that translation, so you might get different results. That's the beauty of the AI-based models. So rather, I would use GPT to translate all the text you have in your CMS, like export your CMS into a CSV, provide the CSV to GPT, translate all that in X language, then store the results into the CMS. So it's done once, it's available offline for using our CMS cache mechanism, and you know what you have as a translation. So you can proofread it. Remember, this is AI. This is not somebody doing the translation for you.
Good idea. Do you see Roman's question? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so since this is an external dependency, I'm assuming OpenAI's API, how fast can we expect for a fix when the API changes and needs interface team input? Two responses here. First, you don't need us because the source code is available, and if you need a quick fix, you can fix it using the source code we have on GitHub. Two, as soon as we know about it, we'll work on that and provide a response as soon as we can. It depends on, the load of the team, who's available. Yes, no, but we don't provide dozens of them. We only provide 3 interface assets based on OpenAI, ChatGPT, Whisper, and Vision to come. So it should not be very long. And it did happen when they OpenAI stopped supporting the chat completion and they went to the completion endpoint. And it took us a few days to update that.
Yeah, I mean, if we ship it, we'll fix it. And if it's in the product, we'll fix it. GitHub is different.
And
I mean, we
these are in
can't
the product.
promise. Yeah, it's if GitHub, I mean, it depends on the CDK is always going to be current, and if it's shipping, it's going to be current in GitHub. Otherwise, there's some things in GitHub that might be a little older. But again, if you're not a developer, you don't even have to look. Don't even worry about it.
I think questions are slowing down.
What is Forrest Gump's password? One Forrest one. So stupid.
I have to work with this guy every single day.
I don't know why I love that stuff so much. It's so dumb. All right. I think that's pretty good. So this is recorded. We will send out the recording in a day or two to everybody who attended, and even people who didn't attend. If they registered, we'll send it anyway. They missed the Q&A part. But I want to thank you for your time and attention. Everything we discuss is ready right now today. It's in the product. It's on the GPTS store, whatever. It's ready to go. So use it, break it, Talk to us in support. Give us feedback. We'll make it better. We're very excited for this. This is pretty cool stuff. Seb, thank you very much, as always.
Thank you, Jeff, for hosting the webinar. Thanks again to all the attendees for being with us. And as Jeff said, if you have any questions, reach out to us on support. We will be more than happy to help.
Take care, guys. Good to see you. Later.
Bye-bye.